Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Scott Chesworth, Liaison and Research Support Librarian at Keele University in the United Kingdom. This lightning talk is about running an escape room on a budget, but more specifically, what happens when you deliberately remove some of the things we usually think define an escape room. Because when we hear escape room, we tend to imagine locked boxes, hidden keys, elaborate props. But what if we take those away? What's left? And does it still work? So I'm creator, facilitator, and the games master for the Escape to the Library escape games at Keele's campus library since 2018. There I am dressed as the Mad Hatter for an escape game that I ran last week, which was called an what was it called? An Extraordinary Escapade. Lots of egg puns in that game. They started as an alternative to traditional library inductions because library stuff can be quite dry. So something more active and more exploratory. And I wrote about the initial pilot in my paper, which is called Escape to the Library, Reframing the Library Induction. Since then, the games have evolved into well-being and team building activities that staff teams like to come and do as a sort of get together, and also student teams. Because the great thing about escape games is that they hit some nice transferable skills like strong communication, team building, teamwork, that sort of thing. And I run these several times a year, often experimenting with different formats and constraints. So today's talk comes from a simple design question I set myself. What if I stripped out the expensive bits of an escape room? So first, a quick bit of context. My traditional escape games follow a fairly familiar structure. They're not really about escaping a room, they're about solving a mystery. That's why I call them escape games rather than escape rooms. Typically, one team of up to 8 players working together in a physical space, usually the library, solving puzzles linked to that environment. For example, a puzzle might involve searching the catalogue, finding a specific book, and using the class mark to unlock an object. And all of those puzzles contribute toward a final goal, unlocking something, stopping a timer, or revealing key evidence. And this model works really well, but it also comes at a cost. Time to design and reset, space to run it, and physical materials to buy, store, and maintain. So the more complex the game becomes, the more those demands scale. So for my most recent and 8th annual Christmas escape game, I set myself two very deliberate constraints: no book searching and nothing to physically unlock. Instead, I designed the game around puzzle types alone. The structure was themed around Santa's 9 reindeer, and puzzles consisted of things like crosswords, word searches, picture Sudokus, riddles, etc., with everything solvable using pen and paper. So suddenly, the design priorities shifted. Puzzles became central, props became optional. Printing was minimal after the initial outlay. And materials were reusable, with only 3 puzzles needing to be reprinted each game, which was the crossword, the word search, and a cross-reference grid. So now I did still add festive dressing, presents, stockings, a fireplace backdrop, but those were purely cosmetic. And what I found was really interesting: constraint didn't limit creativity, it actually fired it. And you must admit the backdrop looks nice. So the way the game worked was that solving puzzles told teams which reindeer delivered which present to which child. But an important learning emerged here. Because nothing unlocked physically, many solutions were text-based. names, labels, words, and that created an unintended challenge for some players, particularly those with dyslexia. So this really shifted my thinking. It's not just about the puzzle itself, it's about what the puzzle produces as an answer. And that has big implications for accessibility. And here are some of the teams who came to play. And Santa. He's always at the Christmas escape games because there's always some crisis going on involving his reindeers or evil elf cults. This one was tame in comparison. But what's important here is people were engaged, they were collaborating, they were having fun, and none of that relied on locks, keys, or hidden objects. So, what do people think? Well, across the week, I had 85 players in 16 teams, with about 34% providing feedback. And the results were really interesting. 44% said they missed unlocking things, and these were mostly returning players. Only 31% missed searching for books, which was much lower than I expected. Overall enjoyment was very high. 26 players rated it 5 out of 5. And my favourite results, the most enjoyed puzzle and the least enjoyed puzzle, were the same one. The picture Sudoku, which tells you something really useful. Challenge isn't a problem, it's part of the appeal. And most importantly, removing locks didn't remove engagement, it just changed where the engagement lived. So what did this show me? A few key takeaways. Puzzles matter more than props. Engagement comes from problem solving, not physical objects. Pen and paper design keeps costs down, reusable, scalable, low resource. Locks are a design choice, not a requirement. They're a tool, not the definition of an escape room. Accessibility must be intentional, especially when puzzles rely heavily on text. And here's my key takeaway from this experience. Escape games are defined by puzzles, not props. Everything else is optional. Okay, so thanks so much for listening to my lightning talk. I look forward to answering any questions you have, but here's something to think about. If you remove locks, props, or space from your own context, what design opportunities might that open up?
Hi, I'm Jackie Richardson. I'm a widening access officer at the University of Hertfordshire. So I'm also at a university like Scott, but I'm dealing with a narrower probably audience because I'm dealing mostly with students and learners who haven't come to university yet. So I'm going to walk you through Budget Breakout, which I changed and improved after last year's talks. So thanks, Scott. You've already helped me with last year with this, and I'm getting more tips this year. So I'll just let you know how that goes. So I want you to imagine. Oh, it's not. Hmm. Imagine that you are living for the first time on your own. You're 18 years old and you need to pay for things like food, rent, all of these things that you've never paid for before. You get to live on your own, and that is exciting. But all of these things like transport, clothes, and you want to have money left over, but you're on a very limited income. So you're actually in a budget crisis. And the only way out of this for you is to become a budget detective. You need to solve puzzles, make smart choices, and keep the budget balanced. So this is the exact scenario that we had for Budget Breakout. So we invite students onto campus, and this is what we ask them to solve, to become these detectives. We created this because students are very used to hearing about student life when they come to visit us, but campus visits can become really predictable and very passive. So, budgeting is a very difficult thing to visualize, especially for a 13-year-old. So, we wanted to create conversations, not just give information. We wanted students to experience, we wanted the children who came to experience decision making rather than just hear about it and see lists of it. So it was very important for us to create an experience that was interactive. And in years gone by, we had a lot of gamification, but last year we introduced an escape room, which was purely physical. This year, we developed it further by using free software called Genially, at least that's how I pronounce it. And doing that, we had young people work through 5 different areas. We had them work through puzzles about household spending, income that they would receive, self-care, food, and transport. So using Genially, we created questions electronically and we had hints that we could give, but the actual answers were found physically in the space. So interestingly, to keep engagement with our young students, we wanted something that was tactile. So we had puzzles that were the actual answers to the questions that were posed digitally. Examples might be a fill in the blank, where you have hints that you can click on that will give you information, like make sure you have all 5 receipts. But the answers to the questions were something that they could physically find and move around the space. It gave them an opportunity to look at the space because we wanted them to see what accommodation was like, but it also gave them physical actions to solve their puzzles. So it was delivered in real accommodation, facilitated by student ambassadors, so university students, and it was designed to spark discussion. So the puzzles could be solved by guessing. You could do that, but key to it were the student ambassadors. So they were the ones who drew out the discussion and the puzzles prompted them. So a puzzle like this about food would prompt our ambassadors to talk about what it's like when you're living on your own, whether you are cooking or if you have money to go out and things like that. So they were absolutely crucial to the working of this. Now, the real spaces really helped engage because they had never seen anything like student accommodation before, most of the learners that we had. So accommodations going into the student accommodation made the budgeting feel authentic for them. It gave them an environment that they could create that magic circle idea that we were talking about, that they could put themselves in the place. Um, Conversation sparking puzzles, as I said, were really important to the working of this. Students debated, discussed decisions rather than silently racing through clues. There wasn't a time limit put on it because the puzzles themselves weren't ch too challenging. It was what came out of the puzzles, the discussions that was key for this working. But the most important bit of it were the student ambassadors. They added the realism. They could answer spontaneous questions that I couldn't um, anticipate would come along with this activity. And also, it's been a long time since I was a student, so they were able to add that the realness into it for the young people. So the impact was really strongly felt by the teachers, definitely, who came on campus because they had experienced our work before and they could see the difference between this sort of interactive puzzle solving activity and they felt like it helped them really grasp on to the concepts we were trying to share. And the learners themselves did also give feedback on how it made them sort of feel the reality of what they were doing. And it just created a general buzz. There was always a lot of conversation that came out of the escape room on the day. More than the IAG talks on student finance for some reason. I'm not sure why. The lessons that we learned, the environment definitely mattered. It mattered for them to be able to see it. Also, having tactile things engaged a lot of students who struggled with just listening or just reading. Having physical puzzles to touch really did help them. Other things we learned were that the puzzles that promoted the most conversation were the most successful and the most engaging. So the puzzles that led ambassadors to share their own lives were the most successful. And technology combined with the student ambassadors brought to life what we wanted to achieve. And it was a combined effort. Adding the element of the questions on the iPad did help the ambassadors along the way when they were giving it. So Budget Breakout, it gave us an opportunity to revive our traditional information, advice, and guidance into an immersive experience. And it helped the young learners imagine themselves at university. So I know there'll be questions later, but I think that this is an ever-evolving thing. And I'm really grateful that I could share what we've done so far.
So my name is Leah McCue, and I am a digital and academic skills course leader in the Skills Center at the University of Bath. And today I'd like to speak to you about building employability skills through hybrid escape rooms. So to start off with, I think we can all agree that escape rooms are absolutely brilliant when it comes to engagement. However, engagement doesn't necessarily mean that you have employability skills that are built into these escape rooms. This is something that needs to be intentionally designed for. And I first started my escape room journey about 3-4 years ago when the concept was introduced to me. And working in the skills space, I really wanted to see how I could use escape rooms, or escape games as Scott called them, to really try and surface these skills and create something that would be fantastic for our students. And so I was really looking at creating this intentional design for skills. And since this time, I've been experimenting with different escape rooms, and I built some that are fully online and self-access, some in-person escape rooms, and then the hybrid escape rooms that I've been trialing recently. So one of the things that I've done in order to be as successful as I possibly can be with these types of escape rooms is that my role is quite specific. When I work as a course leader, I'm supporting staff to support students to develop their skills. So I work mostly with our humanities and social sciences faculty, but that means working with colleagues across the institution in both academic departments and other professional services. And I use my employability skills and my activity design and pedagogical skills in order to support our staff, to support students, and ensure that they're building the employability skills that they need on their course. One of the questions you may have is, when I keep saying the word employability skills, what exactly does that mean? And at the University of Bath, we have sort of distilled these skills down into 13 specific capabilities that we've identified. We say, okay, these are the sorts of things that students are going to need when they go out into the workplace, on placement, or in internships to be really successful. And we've created a platform called My Employability Profile, where they're able to access information and resources about these skills. And the reason they're really fantastic for me is that they give me a really nice design lens around which to build my puzzles and my escape games. And it's also a language that's shared throughout the institution, so everyone knows what we're speaking about when we're speaking about these skills. So when I'm looking at building these skills through play, first of all, why a skills-based escape room? As we've heard over the past 2 days, and the fantastic lightning talks we just heard, this is something that it is fun. It's what students enjoy, and particularly the students who are coming through now, they're used to this type of learning in their secondary schools, this dynamic learning, and it's something they want to continue with. So I thought, okay, great, we can really capitalize on this. And why a hybrid escape room? If I'm completely honest, it was a really happy accident that I came across this idea. I was trying to design an escape room for quite a large cohort with minimal resourcing. And while the intention was to do something in person, it became obvious pretty quickly that that just wasn't going to be possible. So I thought I might try and do something hybrid. What I mean in my case by hybrid is that I was going to have students in the room, but they were going to be completing the majority of things online. It's not something that I've run with some students online and some students in person. I think it probably could work, but it would definitely be a little bit challenging and would require a little bit of tweaking to make that happen. So I'd like to share with you a case study that I've done as a hybrid escape room, and something that I found really, really fantastic and the benefits of this. So the cohort that I had was working with our BSc sport management and coaching students, and I created for them an escape room called the Moon Olympics 2026. And the premise of this escape game was that there was going to be the very first ever Moon Olympics. And there was a very select number of places because it's the first Olympics on the moon. So the students needed to complete a range of tasks to try and see if they could get their country a spot in the first ever Moon Olympics. So this is a cohort of approximately 150 students. They're in their first year and they complete this escape game at the end of their first semester in a mandatory module they all need to take. Now they're sports students, so the vast majority of them are quite motivated by competition. So the unit convener and I thought this would be perfect. We'll build up to it throughout the semester. Now, when we decided to do this, we had quite a big challenge on our hands. As I mentioned, it's approximately 150 students. And so the first thing we did was we sat down and had to decide what skills do we want to make sure that the students are going to focus on in this escape room. So we pulled out a couple of different things that we thought, okay, these are the skills like critical thinking, referencing, etc. The academic skills that we know that they're going to need to be successful as they continue on in semester 2, as well as with their semester 1 assignments. And then we had a look at those employability capabilities I mentioned, and we looked at the different things there. So for example, one of our employability capabilities is critical thinking. And so we could build puzzles that related to that. When it comes to building the puzzles, what was really key here is that the puzzles weren't supposed to reveal the skill, but instead the skill was already there and it helped the students to practice the things. So for example, when it came to critical thinking, one of the puzzles we built around this was that students needed to look at several different extracts from applications for the Moon Olympics. And then they needed to identify which of the extracts was the most critical and which was the least critical. And then they needed to use their critical thinking to give some recommendations to the least critical extract for how they could make their application better and then hopefully get a place in the Moon Olympics. And in addition to that, they're working in groups. So they're working on their collaborative skills. They're also having to communicate effectively and professionally. And all of these things are part of our capabilities. Now, how it ran in practice. It was a 50-minute session in person. And the way that it worked is I created a little video that started students off, that gave them an introduction to the Moon Olympics, what they needed to do in the time frame. They're then already in groups because they work in groups throughout the semester to gain points in each seminar, so another competitive aspect. And then they submitted all of the tasks and accessed the materials on a Xerte module online that we built. So for anyone who's not familiar with Xerte, it's a really fantastic platform that you're able to use and do lots of cool technical things with. So they submitted everything on there, and then the last thing they submitted was something that went straight to their unit convener to get points for the seminar. Now, what happened here was that, as I mentioned, the students submit everything on Xerte. So we're in the room, myself and the unit convener, but we're not really acting as a games master in that room. Instead, we're circulating and we're monitoring, so we're able to help more with the skills-based queries. And then it's really interesting because you're able to pick up on what the things students are excelling at and the things you might find that they're struggling with a little bit more. So for example, we found, a little bit to our surprise, that actually some of the digital literacy was lower than we thought it would be, and the students were asking a lot of questions about things that we thought they would already know how to do. And this was something we were then able to build in later on, and I was able to create an additional resource, not only to help those students, but other similar students who needed to boost their digital skills. So on a whole, running this escape room, we've done it twice now. We've had approximately 100 students who've attended each go, and we received some really fantastic feedback. So 100% of respondents to our feedback survey said they really enjoyed the room, they found that it positively impacted their learning, and they wanted to see more things like this. From a facilitator and creator point of view, what I found is that the hybrid escape room allowed me to gather some excellent data captures. So I can see afterwards how students were doing. I could see in the moment, like I mentioned, the different things they might need support with. It's also very easy to scale it up or down for your numbers. And really importantly, it can mirror real life workplace and the different things they're doing. And we really do try to explain to students how when they go out into the workplace, things are going to be quite hybrid, and it's important to be able to work in that way, especially with groups of people. And some of the last things I'd like to leave you with is if you're thinking of doing something like this yourself, I have a few key points you may find helpful. One of the first things is if you're doing this type of hybrid escape room, it's really important to have a strong digital submission portal. I used some of my colleagues to help me test this, as well as our technologically enhanced learning team, to make sure there were no bugs, because if something had gone wrong with the technology, it would have gotten very interesting very quickly. So having that strong portal is key. I'd also really suggest that you design from your puzzles. You got your skills first, and then you create the puzzle out of that. So skills first, puzzle next, and you're picking those skills first. I'd also really suggest that you make those skills visible and nameable. So something we do is in all of our resources and our workshops, we highlight to the students which skill it is that they're going to be working on building and reinforcing in that particular workshop. So for example, we've got little badges that might appear at the bottom of the screen, or it might be written into something on the side to say, you will be developing skill X, Y, and Z in this particular activity. And then that makes it so much easier for the students to then reflect on what they're doing and to be able to speak about it. So in our case, like I mentioned at the beginning, we have my employability profile where they can go and do a little journal about it, but then they might also be able to then more easily use the wording and the examples of the things that they've done to develop the skills when it comes to different applications they might be doing. So as the last thing that I'll leave you with, I really do encourage you, if you're going to build an escape room and you want to build in the employability skills, to really stop and think, what skills do I want my students to be able to take away from this and practice? And then usually the puzzles will flow from there. So thank you very much. Very happy to answer any questions.